After recent defiance of the progressive ethos, we see Mayor Eric Adams criticizing what has happened with the major influx of migrants into New York City. Well, what does this lead to? It leads to the fact that with it, he has stopped licking the boot, and now the boot is stepping on him because of it. We can see that the Biden administration and the FBI are now cracking down on Mayor Eric Adams, and what I find so fascinating about this is exactly what happens every single time you do not toe the line, and with it, right when you're no longer useful, the establishment will gladly throw you away because they do not want to have that stain on them. And you can see this happened exactly in New York City with what was happening with Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo costing the lives of how many elderly people throughout the COVID pandemic, and with it, shuttling all of them into old folks' homes, sending COVID positive patients into old folks' homes, which ended up causing all of these people with pre-existing comorbidities to bite the dust, and with it, sadly, we lost so many people who wouldn't have had to die from the virus. Well, what do we have? We have Mayor Eric Adams being attacked the same way that Cuomo was. Cuomo not being attacked for the nature of what happened with the COVID scandal, but because apparently sexual assault allegations. And what was his excuse for this? What was the reasoning behind this? He literally said, well, I'm Italian. It's insane. These people are not serious, and with it, you can genuinely understand that they live in a state of hubris to such a degree that they believe they can sexually assault someone and get away with the excuse being, well, I'm Italian. Isn't that unbelievable? And with it, he didn't even receive major blowback from what happened with the sexual assault scandal. He was just ousted from power so Kathy Hochul could take the seat of governor. And with it, is it that we're going to be seeing something akin to that happen here with Mayor Eric Adams, where simply because he has stopped towing the line and now he is actually questioning things, maybe he's going to be ousted from power because he's no longer useful? Let's go ahead and jump into it. From RT, Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, has warned that mass immigration is bankrupting New York City and asked the government for help. Isn't that interesting? But here's the deal. He asks for more funding. He doesn't actually ask for the process of, well, can you help us to maybe, I don't know, limit this mass immigration? No. But even then, that's too much criticism for the Biden administration, and with it, they will gladly allow you to be thrown under the bus by bringing forth some sexual assault scandal from the 90s. They will gladly bring forth something that they've been holding on to for over 30 years. Now imagine how many people within the political class have these little bits of information that the establishment has on them, and if they don't toe the line, what will happen to them? Maybe these accusations just surface, and who knows? Maybe this is one of the main reasons why so many people within the political class just consistently always seem to say the same things and repeat things verbatim when it comes to nature of the talking points that they always seem to use. Just a thought. What do we see from Citizen Free Press? Turns out Eric Adams didn't actually want to become a sanctuary city. We're at the breaking point. There is no more room. We could easily get another 200 to 300,000 more migrant asylum seekers in the next few months. And he's talking about the fact that it's completely unsustainable because they already have 100,000 and they could reach 200, 300,000 more. Well, if 300,000 people is unsustainable for New York, how do you think 7 million people pouring through the southern border into places like Texas and Arizona and New Mexico are? How do you think they're handling it? Because we don't have the resources, but no, you don't care about that. You'll still advocate for these policies, but you simply only care when the rubber meets the road and you actually have to deal with it. And this is why so many of these people that live in these major urban centers are NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. All they care about is the fact of these policies not actually affecting them, because when they realize the impact that these things have and it actually ends up hitting them rather than just hitting the people that they despise in red states, well, then it's a big deal. Then it's a problem. And even then, they don't even advocate for the ways that will actually solve these things. They just want more money from the federal government because they're fucking morons. Let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
It is going to cost us this year $5 billion. In 3 years, $12 billion. We have a $106 billion budget, but $76 billion of that is already accounted for. It's like if you have a house and you budget yourself for the year, you know where your food, your clothing, your electricity, your gas, and all of those things. And all of a sudden, your roof caves in. You say, wait a minute, so I got insurance. Let them come fix it. Our insurance was the federal government, and they're saying to our insurance contract, we're not giving you anything. So now we have to, you, me, taxpayers, have to find $12 billion out of a $30 billion budget. It has to come from somewhere. It has to come from somewhere. And they're leaving us stranded. Stranded. And the worst part about it, we could easily get another 200,000 to 300,000 more migrant asylum seekers in the next few months. We're getting anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 a week. A week. And the next, they say, well, Eric, why don't you just stop letting them in? It's against the law. Federal law does not allow me to do that. Well, why don't you just deport? It's against the law. Federal law doesn't allow me to do that. This has created a crisis that's wrong for New York taxpayers, wrong for the migrants, and wrong for our city and wrong for our country. And the national government is not doing their job. You should not have to pick up the cost of this, and migrants and asylum seekers should not be living in the conditions that we're in. Go look at what's happening in other cities. In Chicago, they're sleeping in the police precincts. In other places, they're sleeping on the streets. Our goal is for children and families not to sleep on the streets. But we're at the breaking point. There is no more room. Over 160-something thousand. And as I stated, we're getting anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 a week. Think about that. This is so devastating for our city.
Well, would you look at that? Mayor Eric Adams coming out talking about the fact of, well, we can't afford this. We can't handle it. We're at our breaking point. We already have 100,000 immigrants. Could you imagine 200 to 300,000? They'll be all over the streets. We won't be able to house them. We have to be able to house these people, which is a noble ideal. It's understandable that you want families to actually have housing, especially in the New York winter. Are you kidding me? But what do we see? We see that someone who is sitting in the mayoral seat of New York City has no idea how economics works. What does he say? He says, well, you shouldn't have to pay for this. And we had insurance, but our insurance was the federal government, and the federal government failed us. He says this right after saying you shouldn't have to pay for this. Isn't that insane? The fact that these people can sit in these positions of power like this, mayors, governors, presidents, and have no idea how monetary policy works, or how money works, or how inflation or taxes work. And all they realize is that, well, you shouldn't have to fund this, and government give money, so that means money free. That's it. That's the rudimentary analysis of what's going on with this. And this is the most mind-blowingly simple thing I've ever seen from someone who's sitting in a position of power, outside of someone like, I don't know, Janet Yellen when she's spitballing, acting like we can afford 2 wars, and the fact that inflation's only transitory. And the fact that actually inflation happening as a transitory state is really a good thing. I remember seeing these arguments happen in real time, and I was just like, how does no one hear this and just think, yeah, you know what? These people are clowns. They have to be overthrown. Joking. Anyways, moving on. What do we see from Eric Adams? We see that he's like, well, realistically, you shouldn't have to subsidize this. This isn't something that should come from the taxpayers. The federal government should pay for it. My guy, there's only 2 ways you can actually subsidize things from the government. One, direct taxes, which is siphoning the wealth from the individual. Or you can have the inflation tax, which is just a stealth tax that lowers the value of the dollar, which ends up making the government end up ramping up their taxes eventually, because the dollars they're getting from you are worth less, which means they need more money, which means they have to print more money, which only raises inflation higher, which makes this a cyclical cycle that snowballs into a never-ending debt spiral. And we can see this happening with the fact of us being $34 trillion in debt. You can see it with the inflation rate of what's happened with a place like Argentina, Zimbabwe. Are you kidding me? Look at Venezuela, and you tell me these things couldn't happen. Look at what happened to Weimar Germany after the Treaty of Versailles, after World War I, when the Deutschmark went from being a valuable currency to being something people burned en masse because it had more value to heat their homes, to make sure their children were safe during the harsh German winters. And if you do not stop this economic death spiral that we are on in the United States, we will end up just like that of Argentina. We will end up just like that of Venezuela. In the time of Weimar Germany, what did we see? We saw that the Deutschmark, 1 trillion marks, was equivalent to $1 US. Not 1,000, not 100,000, not a million, not 10 million, not 100 million, not a billion, not 10 billion. 1 trillion marks equivalent to $1 US. That is the degree of inflation that the people in Germany suffered, and those kind of economic woes is what led to the rise of the German painter. Do you really want to see what happens in places when people get activated to such a degree and are then captured by ideologically based rhetoric? No. So the great thing you could do would be to educate people about economics so they could actually avoid these things in the future. Because when the rubber meets the road and people realize that the economic crisis is something that is solely brought on by the machinations of the government, I really wonder what's going to happen when it comes to the nature of the people who sit in positions of power. Because as we can already see, they're going after government buildings right now in Ireland after this recent stabbing because of the immigration policies. And I wonder how fast the tide will turn, because the left doesn't realize that when you're poking and prodding the right, what you're doing is you're playing with the people who play for keeps, and that is a dangerous game that you should not play lightly. What do we see now? New York City is going bankrupt to fund services for undocumented migrants. Does Eric Adams call for illegals to be sent back? No, he calls for Biden to send them more money, which is exactly true. He doesn't sit there and say, well, we actually have to get rid of these people, we have to deport them, which he talks about the fact of not being able to deport them because that's actually illegal and he's the mayor, so he can't actually do that. But what do we see? He's not saying you have to do this, this is how we solve our problems. He's saying we need more money. Give me dats. That's all I hear. It's just a Karl Marx give me dats. On to Citizen Free Press again. Undocumented migrants are camped outside of the Gracie Mansion to protest Sanctuary City Mayor Eric Adams not giving them enough aid. This is absolutely insane, and this is the definition of what I would argue is the progressive mindset. I'm just going to lay here, and I want you to give me dats. That's it. It's this most ridiculous thing where you believe where there is a need, there is a right that it must be fulfilled. And that is positive rights, and positive rights are nothing but nonsense. The only rights that actually exist are negative rights, and negative rights are property rights. So, what do we see here in this clip? It's indiscernible chanting, but it's people just laying down outside of this mansion protesting what's going on with the undocumented migrants, with these people who are also camped out with the undocumented migrants. What do we see? They're just sitting here protesting, saying, no, we want more money. This is supposed to be a sanctuary city. How come you're not treating us like it's actually a sanctuary city? Which that is a reasonable complaint. New York City and places like Chicago openly claiming to be sanctuary cities, so they can be places who are housing these migrants, so they can be those who are truly taking in the immigrants because they care and they're the good people. Except when it actually comes down to the fact that they have to deal with the mass influx of migrants places like the southern border have been having to deal with for ages now because of the Biden administration's policies and their lax approach to the southern border protection, we see that these people aren't okay with it. In fact, they just want more money from the federal government. They don't even like the fact that there's immigrants there, but they don't actually want to look bad because they've been pushing themselves so deep into the progressive rabbit hole that if they ostracize themselves by saying, no, these immigrants shouldn't be here, they're actually I would say, a detriment to our economy and our city, well, what happens? Then people start to ostracize them from the purity spiral itself because they have thoughts that are outside that of the spectrum of allowable opinion within the progressive ethos. Now what do we see? We go into this clip. New York City Mayor Eric Adams says that Trump Republicans are the ones who are agreeing with his stance on illegal immigration, are the ones to blame for the influx of illegals into his city and America. You just can't make this stuff up. The fact that you would blame the people who are like, you know what we should do? We should seal up the border. And he's like, these are the reason why all of these migrants are flooding into our country is unbelievable. And it's a level of gaslighting that you should always expect from the political class. Now let's go ahead and throw it into this clip.
The politics of it all, right? Your words now being used on the Republican side of things. We're in an election cycle, right? Speaker Kevin McCarthy sounding off in statements on social media saying, I agree with the mayor. You have other Republicans coming out using your words from the other day as almost their campaign slogans now. What do you think of that?
I have one role here to protect the people of this city. I was hired to be the mayor. I was elected to be the mayor of the city of New York. My city is hurting. This could undermine this entire city. Mm-hmm. My children, my families, the long-term impact to migrants who are not getting the proper treatment they deserve, the cuts in services to the children of this city, my elders, my seniors, my housing. And so if people want to politicize this, it was the Trump Republicans that prevented real immigration law. If they want to be accurate, they have a great deal of blame to this. But I'm not going to lied to the people of this city on the danger we're in right now.
And lastly, before we squeeze into a commercial break, do you think this is going to hurt Democrats' chances if there's not a solution when it comes to the House races?
They have their consultants and advisors. I think that it's imperative that we look at this and show that we can govern and lead during this difficult time. And right now, New York City is carrying the weight of a national problem with little or no help.
Fascinating Freudian slip there. Starts off with talking about the fact that I was hired, elected, to be taking care of the citizens of New York, and that is my job. And it's like, don't know if that's actually a Freudian slip, but it's an interesting thought. Nonetheless, what do we see? We see that Kathy Hochul was basically installed as the governor, as they basically ousted Cuomo through what seemed to be a scandal pushed by Hochul's administration and the people that she had that are now with her in positions of power. Don't know if this is actually the case, but it most certainly seems like that is a possibility. And with it, what's going on now? Eric Adams talks about the fact that we're bearing the national weight of the burden from the illegal immigration crisis because they weren't actually willing to implement proper immigration laws. Well, here's the deal. Even if we had open immigration, open borders, the way that so many of these people would claim, that doesn't give you the resources to be able to create sustainability for this mass influx of people. And they're talking about the fact that New York is what bears the burden of this major weight that's being put on the nation. No, Texas bears it. New Mexico bears it. Arizona bears it. You do not actually deal with anything when it comes to this. I live in South Texas. Hispanics are actually my people, and the idea that these people would sit there and be like, well, we have to make sure we're taking care of these individuals because these illegal immigrants really matter. You don't care about them. You use them as a flag to wave to act like you give a damn about their prosperity, and with it, you will leave them to sleep in the cold because you will not divert resources from your budget to take care of these people like you claim to care so much about. And I know they've been housing them and they've been taking care of them, but realistically, if you cared so much, how come you're not housing them in the police stations just like Chicago is? How come you're not putting them up in other places? How come you're not making sure that you're acquiring all of the Airbnbs local around in New York and using state and federal funds to go ahead and fund that? Oh, it's because you don't care to the degree that you say you do. It's a flag that you can wave, and then you can project your failure onto other people and say, well, actually, it's their fault. Now on to Pedro Gonzalez. When a New Yorker pulled a gun on a crazed homeless man recently, Mayor Eric Adams mocked him and said, let the police do their job. A week later, Adams announced budget cuts that will cut the number of cops to levels not seen since the 80s in order to subsidize illegal aliens. Isn't that something? Well, here's something that I find interesting. Adams sucks, for one. Let's start with that. And two, the fact is, who also sucked? Andrew Cuomo. And then Hochul got in, and she sucks just as bad, if not worse. So what does that tell us? If they end up installing someone else in this position of power, well, they might actually be even worse than Mayor Eric Adams. The fact that he has reduced the funds to such a degree when it comes to the nature of handling subsidizing illegal aliens, but he will gladly abandon the citizens of New York, well, we can see that these people do not actually give a damn about those with which they claim to serve, and many of the times this is both on the left or the right, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you simply are one who works for the lobbyist class, and that's simply how it is. It's the same reason why you have no incentive to actually fix the issues, because the actual issues are the thing that give you your ability to run for your position of power, and with it, if you're to actually solve them, while it may look good, then you've completely destroyed your entire fundamental that you are using to circulate your entire narrative around that you were then running on. Now, what do we see? We go into Chaya Raichik of Libs of TikTok. Eric Adams blasted Biden on illegal immigration. Shortly thereafter, his campaign staffers' homes were raided by the FBI. They were confiscating all phones, and now he's being accused of sexual assault for over 30 years. Wow, isn't that something? They held on to this for 30 years and would gladly do so and tell absolutely no one until you do not toe the line. And then they will cast you aside and treat you like that of Woody and say, I don't want to play with you anymore. Now what do we see? Simone Atiba posted this clip of New York Mayor Eric Adams categorically denies sexual assault accusations against him just weeks after the FBI came after him as he continued to critique the Biden administration over the immigration crisis. Watch. So let's go ahead and play this clip, and then after it, I'll give my closing statements.
As I was stating, I want to respond to this lawsuit that was just brought to my attention. It absolutely did not happen. I don't recall ever meeting this person, and I will never harm anyone in that magnitude. It did not happen. And, it's going to go its course, it's going to take its process. But it did not happen. And that is not who I am. And that is not who I've ever been in my professional life. And, it's just something that never took place.
Mr.
Okay,
Mayor, there are
that's
quite
all
a
we have
number
right
of
now, guys. So
lawsuits
we're-
filed
Hold on,
under the
hold on.
same name. A person by the same name has filed quite a number of lawsuits and has even written a book that appears to be on sale on Amazon about how to file lawsuits and how to win. Does that make you question the credibility separate from the fact that you're saying this never happened?
Well, as you know, I've been in public life for almost 40 years, and people know my character. They see how I am, how I carry myself, and I could just emphatically state that one, this never took place, and I do not recall ever meeting the accuser, and it's just not who I am, and I would never do anything to harm someone. That is just my character. And this is right now you just have to really stay focused during these period of times. Mom used to always tell me there are seasons when a lot seem to be going on, and at that moment you just got to let go.
And there you have it, him openly addressing the sexual assault allegations. And I don't actually know if this is true. I'll be the first to openly state that. This could be a factor of someone having something thrown at them solely because they've criticized the Biden administration. I'm not going to sit here and jump the gun and be like, yes, you're absolutely guilty of this. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone within the political class was guilty of doing something like this. It's not like we had a literal island where they were going to do the most heinous things to children. No, that certainly didn't happen. That guy totally did end up offing himself in prison. Most certainly. But what do we see? We see that if this is the case, that he didn't actually commit these crimes, then they're gladly willing to tar and feather someone who means to do well, who has sat there and, as he said, served in public life for the government for 40 years and done so willingly and happily. And if that's the case, then this should show the fact that it doesn't matter how dedicated you are to the cause. If you espouse any form of criticism of the regime, you will be abandoned and you will be made an example of. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Do not jump to felonious accusations and do not actually tar and feather people with the brush of something as heinous as something like sexual assault allegations unless you really have proof. Don't believe the smears that are coming from either the left or the right, because you have to be able to discern what's going on with an objective standard. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great. Tell someone you love them. Subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Peace out.